The federal government and Alberta ink a historic energy agreement, one that paves the way for a pipeline to the British Columbia coast and makes compromises on industrial carbon pricing that could affect the entire country.
This is a great day. It's a great day for Alberta. It's a great day for Canada.
The last 10 years have been an extremely difficult time for hundreds of thousands of Albertans and their families whose livelihoods depend on a strong and growing Alberta oil and gas industry. But today we're turning a corner.
This deal says construction of that pipeline could begin next year, but there's still some work to do before shovels hit the ground. Alberta has to find a private sector proponent and get a carbon capture project up and running by 2035. Meanwhile, in Ottawa, the federal government is tasked with explaining what all of this means for its climate goals and responding to the concerns of other provinces, including British Columbia, where Premier David Eby says this in a statement: "As a country, it's time to stop rewarding bad behavior. It cannot be the case that the projects that get prioritized in Canada are those where a premier threatens to leave the country." Okay, so there's a lot to talk about with our party insiders. Greg McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial advisor. Fred Delory is a former Conservative national campaign manager. And Melanie Richer is a former communications director for the NDP. We're going to get to David Eby in just a second. But Greg, let's start with you. If anyone was doubting Mark Carney's commitment to getting a pipeline to Tidewater, that doubt should be gone as of today, correct?
Absolutely. I think it was May 5th of last year, within days of the election, Danielle Smith did a pretty major statement and press conference where, shots fired at the federal government before, things had even settled around cabinet ministers and things. And she started a bunch of initiatives about this. I know we'll probably get into this, in terms of the separatist movement, kind of legitimizing them a little bit. But all of those things at that time were portrayed an attitude where she was expecting something similar to Justin Trudeau. And a year and a week later, it's been very, very different. So I've heard some people say today that they're very surprised by this, and for lots of different reasons. But it is almost as if the Prime Minister continues to call the Premier's bluff. And when people look at this, I'm glad that the timetable and the deadlines came out, because the next deadline, July 1st, was on her. There are some other things around that are on her as well. You mentioned British Columbia. In the MOU from last November, one of the things that's listed that Alberta has to do is collaborate with British Columbia to make sure that they are benefiting economically, fiscally as well. So, in terms of politically, I think there's a win there. Do I have some concerns from starting with a communication standpoint? Absolutely. Okay, so Fred, on this,
there's give in both directions here, right? Alberta gets a lower industrial carbon price than the existing federal plan had set out under law. But the federal government gets Alberta's buy-in to the carbon market so that a lot of the off-ramps to actually pay the full price of carbon per ton go away, and you get a market with rigor, but is less ambitious than was initially there. Do you think Mark Carney is calling her bluff, as Greg says, or is this what he thinks is truly the best path forward here?
I don't see him as someone operating, playing games with premiers. I think he's trying to get deals done and trying to get things moving here. And this is clearly a major sore point in Alberta, and has been for a very long time, to get their resources to other markets other than to just the U.S. So this is an historic deal that could be massive for our country, and I just get the sense that Carney is just trying to get things built. It's been his whole narrative. We talk about narrative often here. I don't think he's playing games. I think he's showing, or trying to show, that he is committed to this, and this is another example of, I think, success. Now, 2027 is not far away. If we have shovels in the ground then, we keep saying, as soon as he becomes Prime Minister, we're dealing with all these economic issues. We need shovels in the ground right away. It does take time. But to get something announced that quickly with Premier Smith, that we could actually have a pipeline starting to build in 27, is huge and is drastic.
It's good to see you finally grasping the importance of narrative, Fred.
It's good that the government has, and now look how their polling is, now that they have.
Well, on this, I mean, Mel, it is a big move for, I know they like to style themselves the new Liberal government, even though like 80% of the caucus was in the old Liberal government. But it is clear that the circumstances of the world have changed, but the direction of policy, industrial policy, federal-provincial relations, this is the clearest sign yet. It's a completely different day.
completely different day. And you know, Fred talked about how it's impressive to see how quickly this deal came together. I don't know that it's impressive. I think they just gave her everything. They gave the Premier everything that the Premier wanted, and that's why it went so quickly. You know, they talked about a bargain ahead of the conversation when we talked about the MOU back when it was announced, but it seems like there wasn't necessarily a bargain, and they're waiting to bargain later. So I don't know how they come out of this saying that they've gotten a win and they've gotten the Premier to do more than what the Premier was already doing. I think you're not making the case for that. As it relates to completely different government, no kidding. It is almost like they have thrown every single thing Prime Minister Trudeau has done outside of what the NDP was able to get done with the Supply and Confidence Agreement. But as it relates to the environment, that was the outside of legalizing marijuana, the environment and the things that the Prime Minister Trudeau moved on really was the cornerstone of everything he's done over the last 10 years. If you were to ask a lot of folks,
Canada
childcare may
Child
be
Benefit
in there,
and the
yeah.
Canada Child Benefit
may also be in there too. But like that is what got people like the stakeholders that you talked about already, like the Canadian Climate Institute, like any of those organizations that have consistently stood with the Liberal government and have given the Liberal government space to do what they wanted to do to tackle the climate crisis. They're all out today saying, like, they, I think, feel all betrayed because it's the complete opposite. So
They sure do feel frustrated, Greg. And I just wonder, like, what do you think? Like, I know the pragmatism of the moment, right? Like, the rules we operated under for 50 years, they're all blown up by what's happening down south and all of those things. And that they make this point repeatedly in the literature released today on this, that you can't stick with the old playbook. But, you know, you got a lot of the people in that caucus who, I don't know if they ran on pushing off industrial carbon pricing by a decade and a half, you know, in Alberta. I mean, how comfortable do you think this is going to play with a lot of Liberals?
Well, to Mel's point about Justin Trudeau, he often drove this right through the middle, and there's no win there, and he didn't get a lot of wins around this. I mean, he did TMX, which in, I think, 2024 tripled its output. And although a lot of conservatives in Alberta want to pretend that that didn't happen, he did do that. He did cancel Northern Gateway. He probably got blamed unnecessarily in terms of Energy East and Keystone. Those decisions were really elsewhere. But he never really got the win. I mean, it seemed, you know, I remember thinking that his position was, you know, not necessarily every pipeline, but we're not going to say no to every pipeline. And I'm not sure it really got him anywhere, you know.
In Alberta, do you mean, or broadly?
I think broadly. Right? I mean, I think, you know, there was something for everyone to hate there, so nothing happened. The Prime Minister has talked about the need for energy security, trade diversification, the need to grow our economy. And I know that the cabinet ministers that also have the economic portfolios, there's a lot of pressure on them to be delivering, like in terms of, you know, domestically in Canada. But, you know, I am interested to see what the reaction will be in caucus. I mean, people are not blind that, you know, Canadians seem to want something to happen. And for a long time, the Liberal Party, my party, treated Alberta like a flyover, the expression in the United States, flyover state. And then you can't make that argument this time. And yeah, there is a huge amount of pragmatism here. Question as well is, at some point, Mark Carney is going to have to use political capital. He's done some very brave things.
He's done a lot of that already.
Well, I mean,
for a lot on this
political capital within the caucus. His caucus is bigger than it was a year ago. His polling still pretty strong. But at some point, this is where it's going to be. I noticed Danielle Smith said that she was quoting the rates of support for separatism in Alberta last year, and now this year it's lower. I don't think she has anything to do with that. I think that's Mark Carney.
Well, we'll see. I mean, the referendum is sort of like in the backdrop of all of this, and we'll talk a little bit about it. But, you know, Fred, we've seen Avi Lewis for the NDP has said this is a capitulation and a surrender to the oil and gas industry. The Conservatives say essentially nothing's changed here, which is, I don't know if that makes life difficult for Danielle Smith in Alberta, because if there's a proponent by Canada Day, clearly something's changed.
Look, it's very, very hard to be a conservative messaging on this right now. It's like Mark Carney, the day he's elected, should have grabbed a shovel and started digging that pipeline. Why didn't he get it done then? So it's very challenging.
On this or all things?
For all things. He should have been at every province digging something. It's tough when you have a Liberal Prime Minister acting like a Conservative trying to build big
For both
projects.
parties.
It is. Well, it seems to be, look, Liberals seem to just suck it up and go with it. Whether, you can go left, right, they're just happy to be in power. But ideologically, look, he's getting things done. If this happens, a lot of Albertan Conservatives, this is what they've been asking for. This is what they wanted. So this is, politically, it's one of those things where I think Poilievre is probably best. He could have just taken today off. He didn't need to go in and
Right.
weigh into this.
Well, how would we know if he did?
One thing you cannot criticize with the leader of the opposition is work ethic. The guy hustles. Like, he's traveling and doing a lot of stuff, so we got to give him that. But Mel, Avi Lewis was hustling by calling it a surrender. David Eby, fuming? Could we say that? As a country, it's time to stop rewarding bad behavior. It cannot be the case that the projects that get prioritized in Canada are those where a premier threatens to leave the country. We'll put David Eby down as undecided on this, shall we? What do you make of what the province next door is saying about Alberta?
Yeah, and you talked about the previous government wasn't paying attention to Alberta. They bought a pipeline. I don't know what else could have done, and
paid
that
off
did not
so well.
But,
They
but
lost
it,
all
but
their
it didn't
MPs.
quell any feeling of separatism, right? So the idea that doing this will now quell ideas of separatism, I don't know. Obviously, Mark Carney is a different person than Justin Trudeau is, and is more even-keeled. So I think there's that. He doesn't upset people in the same way because I think he doesn't react in the same way. But still, that didn't quell any separatism before. So I don't know how this changes things. And what a bet. You talk about he's calling her bluff. He's calling her bluff, and he's completely throwing BC under the bus if he is, or at least the BC government. The other quote that I thought was interesting from Premier Eby today was the quote that, we hope that the government works as closely with us on the things that we're hoping to build in our province as they are with Premier Smith in Alberta. And I think that's super fair. I think not just for Premier Eby, but I think for premiers all around the country, if they were willing to give Premier Smith what they wanted, what she wanted, what Alberta wanted, well then what should the other provinces be taking a look at and say, okay, well then how does this change things for the project that we want, or how does that change things here? I don't know how that doesn't signal to everybody else, ask for everything you want and we may give it to you. And if not, what does that mean in order of priority?
In fairness, though, on BC, Mel, David Eby and others do, when they come on to criticize Alberta on this, they talk about we have more major projects on the list than anybody else, right? And Tim Hodgson was there yesterday on LNG 2. They've approved that pipeline expansion to go to the south. There has been a lot of federal activity and support.
But the difference with BC is they've done the work. They've got proponents willing to do it. They've done the work with Indigenous people, with First Nations, and they've done the work with communities so that there's buy-in, not just from their government, but from their government, from industry, and from First Nations.
No, I got you on that. I'm just saying quantitatively, there's a lot of stuff happening in British Columbia right now that the federal government's playing a role in.
because they've stepped up to the plate.
Yep. No, I got you. So, Greg, I don't know if this quells separatist sentiment, certainly with the hardcore segment of the population in Alberta, but I think what this does do that is a little bit different than what we've seen before is that it takes the premier off the board as a critic of the federal government, right? I asked Daniel Smith when we had our conversation, our regular Friday chat with the Premier of Alberta, all the excuses are gone now, right? You're going to get a proponent. It's on you. And she can't blame Mark Carney because he's given her what she wanted.
Does that sound like a bluff being called? That kind of does to me. Whether that is, to your point, Fred, whether that might not be Mark Carney's psychology, but it does, whether you want to look at it from business terms, negotiating terms, it does have that effect. And does it take her off the board as a critic? I don't think it actually does, because I think, just like Pierre Poilievre is not for changing, she has a tendency to always want to be picking a fight with Ottawa. So once she got the MOU, she was still talking about a provincial police service or appointing Alberta, appointing their own judges. So she continues to do those things, even today in the press.
No, I mean specifically on the resource development ambitions of Alberta, right? The federal government is not standing in the way of a bitumen pipeline here. They're enabling it, right?
Yeah, on this one, but I don't think if I was advising the federal government, I would not give them comfort that this doesn't mean that she's not going to be whack-a-mole and pop up somewhere else with another criticism. Don't think that you are establishing a really great working relationship like perhaps the Prime Minister has with Tim Houston in Nova Scotia or Doug Ford. I don't think that part hasn't changed, in my opinion.
Right, but Fred, we still see Doug Ford take shots at the federal government, not at Mark Carney as an individual, but as the federal government. And I think even with Smith, who very much personalized her criticism on Justin Trudeau directly and Stephen Guilbeault directly, she doesn't do that with Mark Carney, right? And I think if she tried to say he is now the reason we can't do this, I don't know if people are going to buy it, even in Alberta,
Well, look, we're not there. We're moving forward, so you can't. It's quite the hypothetical to say it would go the other way. They seem to be.
Is this your first time on the panel, Fred?
But it's just it's one of those things though where there's going to be criticism. There's going to be arguments over different issues.
But the standards stuff, right?
This is a confederation where we're a very unique country where our provinces are almost like little independent countries in so many ways, where they have so much more power than other states do. Any sub-states do in the rest of the world. We talked this whole thing about us joining the European Union. It would have to be a merger of the European Union because we are almost our own, set up as our own type of union in itself. So you're going to have conflict between prime ministers and premiers. That's always going to happen. You're going to have that. On this issue, it's in Premier Smith's court in many regards to get this stuff done, and we'll see if she can accomplish it.
Okay, Fred, you describe them as mini countries. There is a legitimate push to try to make Alberta a mini country. And as Alberta commits to consulting with Indigenous people on this pipeline project, the province is also appealing that court ruling this week that found that it had failed to consult with First Nations over that petition to call a separation referendum. And I asked Premier Daniel Smith about this contradiction earlier in the show. Have a listen to that.
I think that demonstrates the error in law that I believe the court has made and the anti-democratic decision that the court made. When you have a particular project, you obviously have individual nations that are going to be impacted directly by that. They're hunting, fishing, trapping rights, and you have to negotiate community benefit agreements. It's a very defined way of doing duty to consult. I have no idea what the court would expect a citizen group to do to be able to meet a bar of a duty to consult when it comes to putting forward a referendum question.
Okay, Mel, I don't want to get into the legalese of that, right? I did a bit. No, I went through that with Jeff Rath last night. But
For the record, I was kidding.
Yeah, I know. But you have the separatist group appealing that, and you have the government appealing that. And this is yet more political capital that Daniel Smith is spending to get separatism on the ballot in October, while at the same time promising Indigenous co-ownership of a pipeline and appealing their victory in court over the illegality or the impropriety of this particular referendum. How do you see that dynamic playing out as, she tries to help this happen in defense of her law while trying to cement a solid economic future with the rest of Canada based on the deal with Mark Carney?
I don't know how you can have confidence that when she says she's going to consult First Nations on the pipeline, that you can actually have faith that that's actually going to happen based on the fact that, she kind of talked in a circle there, but basically what she was saying is that First Nations should only be consulted if there's a project at hand, which is categorically not how First Nations see their rights and, the things that are owed to them because of what has happened in the past. So I don't know how you then think, sure, we're going to have confidence that this conversation is going to go well, that our views and our ideas are going to be respected as part of that process. I don't know how that works. As it relates to using more political capital on this, last week was interesting. It was almost like you saw her back away a little bit from this with everything, with the data breaches, with the investigation, with everything's happening. To double down when there's so much controversy, when there's so much ugliness, for lack of a better word, around this is fascinating, and I don't understand it, other than this is something that you actually want to happen, and that is scary.
I mean, Greg, she was given clear off-ramps to move away from this, right, for a bunch of reasons. Jeff Rath did say if it didn't get on the ballot, if Daniel Smith didn't help it, that the separatist movement, such as it is, would take her out, like it helped do with Jason Kenney. But on the duty to consult, if she makes an application to the Major Projects Office by Canada Day, which is what she says she'll do, she has no choice but to start consulting, right? If she's the proponent, or if Enbridge or someone steps in, one of the big pipeline companies, that they would have to do it. So it will trigger that, but at the same time, she's going to court, and that could get a little bit ugly.
Yeah, the three of us were watching your interview with her in the green room, and she was interpreting the duty to consult. And I wrote the LSAT one, so I guess I'm the expert on the panel. But I'm not sure her definition would be the one that stands up. I also, like, if you draw the thread from what the judge said about this. And if they win that appeal, it goes ahead to a referendum. That goes ahead to separate. Like, at some point, duty to consult is coming back. You're not going to avoid this. And Jonathan, on your panel the other night, talked about what an excellent communicator the Premier is. Mel and I were talking about this. Well-modulated voice, very calm, and you're listening, you're thinking, wait, I don't think she didn't come even close to answering the question there. But she's very, very good at this. But I don't think she is the right person to be talking about duty to consult, and especially in the realm of separatism. Like the same press conference last year where she said she was, concerned. She said that these are not extremist individuals, and they should be respecting the democratic process. I'll just tell people, go watch the interview you did with the gentleman last night. They can decide for themselves, who's extremist or who's not. She also, in that press conference, announced two things. One was the Alberta Next panel, and she did all these town halls last fall where she continued to add oxygen to the whole separatist. She legitimized it, and it was stacked with her own party members. So going back, I don't know if she necessarily needed to go this route with this Prime Minister. He was on the record saying that he wanted major projects. You saw today how much he refers to himself as an Albertan, that he's from there. I think she's done all this, and ultimately she might not have had to.
Well, Fred, she might have, because of the nature of the coalition that makes up the United Conservative Party, right? Like, there's the leadership of the separatist movement, and there are people who are open to it. And then there are people who are just really pissed off with the federal government, right? And that's almost all on her side of the ledger. You got to manage that somehow. But, Rath says if she doesn't move on this, they're coming for her.
Well, to go the history of Alberta, Ralph Klein was the last premier to have more than one term. It goes back that far. No one has had more than two terms. So it is a very challenging province to govern, and there's something boiling there. Like, if you look at the polling, they're not far off where Quebec is right now with their separatist movement. And we talk about separatism there regularly. There's a federal parliament has a major political party there with a ton of seats. We have
the Conservatives or the Bloc? I'm kidding. I tease.
But there's something. The water's boiling in Alberta, and if this is her attempt to try to let some of that steam off, I don't know. But again, it is a very difficult province to govern in many ways, and she's got big challenges, and hopefully today is something that does let a lot of that steam off, knowing that this big project could potentially happen.
Mel, there's a remarkable irony in boosting oil production and building a pipeline to lower the temperature, but that seems to be what they're doing here politically. Jason Kenney has said the federalist voice so far has been kind of absent. Now, there hasn't been a certification of this. We don't yet know if it's actually going to happen. But, with this MOU process complete now and moving into the application and assessment process, we need to start seeing some of that staunch federalist voice speaking to Alberta soon.
I think so. In the same way that, we've talked about this as it relates to Quebec, that obviously can't be the Prime Minister, but it does need to be someone.
So help me understand, why can't it be the Prime Minister? Because you can't outsource national unity. He grew up in Edmonton. He can speak on the economy. Like, he seems to me to be the guy who can not go lecture people on Canada, but to offer proof points and make an argument for where they fit into his vision. I mean, it doesn't. Who would it be if not Mark Carney?
Pierre Poilievre, a Conservative member of Parliament who is a leader of the opposition. Look at in Quebec during the last referendum, the Conservative leader at the time was Jean Charest, and he was a guy who became Captain Canada, or one of them, that led the charge on the no side. Poilievre has an opportunity, and to show the rest of the country his strengths, if he can go out there and lead on this, if he chooses to do so.
No, Mel, and I didn't mean to interrupt you because I think you're wrong, because I legitimately struggle with it, right?
I always feel weird, not weird, but it feels maybe not talking down to, but there's the risk of that, right? Like there's a risk of, so you would have to be really, really careful. I also think he's got a lot of things that he needs to focus on. I think as part of his message in the how do we build Canada, how do we, reduce barriers between our provinces, and how do we work better together to be stronger in the face of what's happening in the U.S. But just in going into the future, I think there's many proof points as part of those speeches, as part of the things that he's doing to show the benefits of staying in Canada. I just don't know personally if I was advising him, I'd want him to be the person
do it indirectly
leading it.
rather than directly.
Correctly.
I gotcha.
Exactly.
Right.
I think that that's probably a better approach to show the benefits in other ways instead of doing a Alberta Town Hall road tour to tell communities throughout the province why they should stay within Canada. I think that could be tasked to somebody else,
right.
but should be given proof points in other ways.
That's it, because Greg, if you look at, there's been a whole bunch of announcements, on strategies. So you go back to C5 and the major projects. You look at the other regulatory red tape reform they're talking about on all projects. You look at the electrification plan and now the MOU. I mean, these are a series of proof points moving on things that matter to a lot of the business community in Alberta. I was joking with a Liberal today. I said, you're running this majority with Pierre Poilievre's caucus and Stephen Harper's policies. It's an interesting pitch to Alberta.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Prime Minister also, to talk about our coast, said something about Muskrat Falls and maybe a role for the federal government.
Gull Island more than that, I
okay.
think. Yeah, the undeveloped thing, but who knows where that goes, because there's a whole history with Quebec.
And I'm not sure if Fred was being facetious or not about Pierre Poilievre, but he is an Alberta MP who did not, and he's the leader of her federal party, and he didn't seem to play any factor in this. Did he not say this week that he wanted a pipeline done with a much more rapid timetable than...
Approved within 100 days of receiving the application.
And so, when you see the announcement today between the Premier and the Prime Minister, it really does feel that he's not in the loop. He doesn't seem to know what's going on. And again, if Albertans are unhappy with how things are playing for them in Ottawa, they have a ton of MPs from Alberta that you never ever see. I think they're very happy. They know that if they win, they're probably not going into cabinet. They're very happy to do what they do, but they are absent from this. And I'm circling back because I think it's important. When I saw that headline about Jason Kenney, and he said, "Where's the Federalist voice?" I thought, who is he talking about? And he was talking about the federal Conservative MP.
Yeah, well, I think Kenny, and I'll give you the last word here, Fred. I think he realizes, to the people that need to be swayed here, he's too much of a polarizing figure, right? He knows what happened to him with the party, and he's self-aware enough to know that. But make the case for Mr. Poilievre. He's obviously not going to be at the table when Daniel Smith and Mark Carney are sorting this stuff out. But he is the leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition. He is a federalist, and clearly he resonates with a lot of the people Daniel Smith also resonates with.
Yeah, he has an opportunity here, I think, to shine if this goes to an actual referendum vote, where he can go out and be the champion for the country. And we would see that coast to coast. We talk about the pipeline and that impact it has. I know people around all around the country benefit from it. But him, in terms of a referendum, we would see him out there. Because if he doesn't do it, there's the alternative. If he doesn't wrap himself in the flag,
yes. Yeah. That was the criticism of Trump,
that's
right?
disqualifying.
Right?
That is disqualifying.
So how does he calibrate that, just as a final point, with this MOU? Because the reaction from the Conservatives is that this is a nothing burger. It's not going to lead to anything.
Those are two very different things.
But it's a proof point that Canada can work. The federal government will respond to Daniel Smith. I mean, is he undermining her with that line?
Look, he's the leader of the opposition. He's not going to agree with what the government does on a lot of things. I would not compare pipeline agreement versus a referendum to separate. Those are two very different. He can take his issues there and disagree with the MOU, but on the referendum, he better wrap himself in.
Well, they're running on the same timeline, so we'll see. But we are out of time on our timeline. Greg McEachern, Fred Delory, Melanie Richer,